One youngster murmured into the breeze that night, but the dog heard her. A snowstorm from the mountains silenced the valley. Max, a retired K9, remained alert on an old cabin porch, ears twitching, nose elevated to the storm, while the world lay warm behind locked doors. A child was breaking somewhere. Snow swallowed a motherly wail somewhere. Nobody else heard the whispered words, "Sorry, Mom. I'll do well." Yet Max did. That night, he led his handler, Eli, to transform 3 lives forever. A neglected girl, a mourning soldier, and a dog who never forgot duty off the battlefield. More than a rescue story, this is about homecoming. Wind clawed down from the mountains like a living thing before we started. It howled across Fairbend, Montana's ice roofs and trees. A town that barely touched the map, yet maintained its own pace. Snow-covered street lamps cast lengthy, swinging shadows on vacant walkways. Some porch light turned off. A window was closed against the storm elsewhere. To the north of the town, past the pines, where the street lights no longer reached, a weathered, dark-roofed cabin stood alone at the edge of the forest, knee-deep in snow. Eli Turner, 43, broad-shouldered and skinny, with a frame built for battle and worn thin by peace, sat on the edge of his bed in thick woolly quiet. His face was bone and lines, with an angular jaw and a few days of beard, and a small scar over his left brow like a lingering recollection. The low, pleasant light above him couldn't lighten the shadows beneath his eyes or his tight jaw. Right shoulder pain, prior surgery, and cold didn't help. The dreams didn't. He came to the cabin for recuperating on medical leave. 6 weeks. Time to breathe and recuperate. But men like Eli had trouble breathing. If silence reminded him of firefights, no. Not when quiet seemed like hanging out for the next blast. He stroked the thick dog fur at his feet. Max, a retired K9, is still sharp after 10 years. Max, a purebred German shepherd with a charcoal amber coat, had vigilant ears even when asleep. His soldier-like eyes were steady, attentive, and haunted. Max had served with Eli in Iraq, explored destroyed Syrian buildings, and saved Eli from IED shrapnel. Though his gait was slower and his right leg stiff with age, his senses were still unequaled. Eli stood, putting on his coat and heavy flannel over his t-shirt. In heavy gusts, snow fell sideways outside. It had arrived faster than predicted, and the prognosis called for additional storm overnight. To inspect the perimeter, he opened the cabin door. Max moved because of an old habit he couldn't break. Instantly, the dog awoke. He snapped to attention without barking. Face to wind, ears pricked. He fled. No hesitation, straight into the white, disappearing down the porch stairs into the woods. "Max!" Eli shouted, but the wind muffled him. Eli instinctively grabbed his boots, gloves, and went after him. Snow slapped him, blinding, needling his cheeks, and freezing his lungs. His torch barely cut through the night, but he followed paw prints deep and sure across the hill and down to the tree. Eli was knee-deep in water after 10 minutes. The cold bit through his gloves, causing shoulder ache with every movement. Still, he persisted. Max never ran aimlessly. It wasn't prey or instinct this time. There was intent. Max was located near Miller's Park's white-covered playground. The snow-covered slope resembled a collapsed spine swinging in midair. Max stood immobile, ears flat, nose to ground at its base. Eli spotted a bundle, a youngster curled firmly under the slide's plastic, half covered in snow, as if the storm had erased her. She had pale skin, blue lips, and matted hair on her cheek. One mitten was missing, her coat thin, damp, and torn at the sleeves. She was still. Eli kneeled beside her. Max whined softly and backed up, sensing its weight. "Hi, youngster. Can I be heard?" Eli's harsh voice was nearly lost in the wind. The girl scarcely moved. Her lips split. "Sorry, Mom," she muttered. "I'll be good." Only that. Breathless, she fell into the snow. Eli went ahead. He embraced her. She was light and covered in his cloak. Her skin was icy, her heart weak. "Look down at Max. Go home, boy. Prepare the door," he said. Max ran off like he understood everything. My return ride was blurry. Snow obscured the path. Trees swayed like ghosts at night. Even though his shoulder screamed with every step, Eli continued. The child's breath was all that mattered. She needed warmth. She needed a chance. Max gave her one. He arrived at the cabin to find Max scratching at the door. Eli stumbled inside, laid the girl gently on the ancient couch near the fire, and began taking off the wet clothing. He patted her hands, blanketed her, and placed hot water bottles by her sides. Max sat nearby, staring at the girl. Minutes passed. Her chest lifted, sank, then rose again, steadier. Eli sat breathless. Max was sitting with his chin on his paws, ears pointing at the child. "You found her," Eli whispered. "You damn old hero." Wind lashed the windows as the storm howled outside. The cabin was warm inside. Little girl was safe. A soldier breathed easier, while Max, the duty-bound dog, looked over them. Soft amber light from the low fire illuminated the cabin's sinful pine walls. The storm screamed outside but eventually stopped. The couch was a recovery bed with flannel blankets, an ancient military sleeping bag, and 2 towel-wrapped warm water bottles. Lily hadn't moved since Eli lay her down. For the first hour, he barely moved. I watched her tiny chest rise and fall, a tiny wonder with each breath. Once blue, her face was pale. She had frozen clumps of lashes. She had damp light brown hair on her forehead from the snowmelt. Her hands were cold despite the warmth around her, but her pulse was steady. Eli crouched by her again and carefully stroked her forehead with a warm cloth, not waking her. Max curled up like a motionless sentinel, his golden brown coat barely twitching, his gaze never leaving the girl. He watched, vigilant, and there since they returned, without barking. Eli finally stood, wincing at his shoulder stiffness. The pain reminded him of the mortar strike that destroyed his unit in Mosul 2 years before and the surgery that followed. Scar tissue, metal pins, months of therapy. He entered the small kitchen, turned on the kettle, and leaned on the counter, thinking about her. His older sister was fiery, headstrong, and funny before quieting down. She left Fairbend a decade ago and never returned. Not after their parents expelled her for recklessness. Their father, a retired sheriff and local pillar, considered her a shame when she got pregnant at 19. She left town with a canvas bag and a bloated belly. The last time Eli saw her was then. He remembered her pained eyes and rebellious voice. After writing a few times, they stopped. He was now with a girl that resembled Grace at that age. Thin body, high cheekbones, and wide inquisitive eyes. Kettle whistled. He added a peppermint tea bag to a chipped cup of boiling water. He needed his hands to handle the cabin's single non-caffeinated item. He saw the small notebook on the floor beside the couch as he turned back to the living room. Must have dropped from Lily's jacket. Eli approached, picked it up, and sat carefully in the chair across from her. The notebook was battered, water-damaged along the spine, with bent pages and cold bleeding ink. The front read just Lily's notes in huge, uneven block letters. Within were dozens of pencil doodles, some crude, others meticulous. A drawing showed a female at a dinner table with a broken chair. Another photo showed a woman pointing at a juice puddle with angry eyes. Silent, horrible stories filled each page. Eli slowly breathed through his nose, exhausted. He didn't need context. He'd seen enough hurtful houses and warriors from them. He placed the notebook lightly on the table and faced Mac's dog's ears flicked as if responding to a silent signal. "Yes," Eli whispered. "It appears we have a storm survivor." Lily stirred hours later. The snow had calmed as the sky became gunmetal gray. After slowly blinking at the ceiling, she rotated her head and spotted Max first. The dog raised his head and thudded his tail on the wooden floor. Lily's expressionless gaze was on him. Then she regarded Eli. She whispered, "You're not a policeman." Eli softly said no. "My name is Eli. This is Max. He discovered you." She didn't reply. She drew the blanket firmly about her shoulders. Eli said, "You're safe. Nobody's coming. Not in trouble." Lily sat up slowly. Her rigid movements indicated that her limbs weren't totally controlled. Hands trembled as she grabbed the notebook. Eli handed it to her silently, holding it close to her chest. "Did you read it?" "I did," he said. "It seemed you were dying." I sought clarification. While not running, Lily didn't talk again. Eli brought her warm soup, handmade chicken from his freezer, with herbs and pepper later that day. Max sat at her feet at the tiny table. Eli opposite her, but not too near. She ate slowly, almost mechanically, as if the food could disappear. After, she asked, "Stay tonight?" "Stay as long as you need." She looked down. "They might look for me. Do you want them to find you?" She didn't reply. Eli set up the extra room cot that night. One of the cabin's 2 bedrooms was rarely utilized. For backup, he put a heater and blankets near the bed. However, when he woke up at 3 a.m. from a half-dream, half remembering of gunfire and sand, Max was gone at the foot of the bed. Eli walked silently down the hall. Max lay on the floor outside Lily's door, head between his paws, tail still, like he was watching. Lily sat by the fireside with Max's head on her lap the next morning while snowflakes fell like ash. Although she hadn't spoken, Eli observed how she laid her hand on Max's fur like she was anchoring. TV was off. Fire and occasional wood creaks were the only sounds. Eli sat on the steps with coffee, wondering what Grace might have done. Someone knocked on the cabin door afternoon. Sarah was the only neighbor within a half-mile. Sarah Dunham, a tall, wiry mid-50s woman, with a pleasant face creased by wind and sun. Her thick flannel and denim garments and high-knot gray-blonde hair served their purpose. She wasn't nosy, but she noticed after living alone after her husband died. When she saw Eli at the door with a girl behind him, she cocked an eyebrow but didn't question. "Bro, figured the storm knocked out your supplies," he added. Low, dry, and soothing, her voice. Eli thanked her, took the container, and briefly talked outdoors. She looked at Lily, then Max. "She okay?" "She will," Eli said. "She's not mine, but currently needs a home." One nod from Sarah. "Then this is her best option." Without pressing, she left. Eli watched her disappear into the trees, then returned inside. Lily was caressing Max and whispering. Despite not understanding what she meant, Max slowly wagged his tail. Eli felt tranquilly for the first time in weeks. The storm faded, but the cold stayed, settling into the soil and bones. Icicles hung like fangs from every eave in the glassy, white landscape. Though the world was serene, a silent storm was starting within the cottage. Lily wrote in her notebook at the corner wooden table, her skinny legs hanging above the floor. The only sound was the fireplace flames crackling and pencil scratching. Max laid under the table, head on one paw, eyes up, watching, waiting. Eli was pouring coffee into a tin mug at the kitchen counter while massaging his neck. With questions assaulting his mind, sleep was hard. He looked at the girl again, and then at the mantel portrait. Grace as a child hugs her teen brother, both nervously smiling in a distant backyard. It was obvious that Lily resembled Grace. The same jawline, and look saw too much and said too little. Finally, "Lily," he said evenly, "please allow me to inquire." She nodded without looking up. "Your mom?" She had what name? She tightened her shoulders when the pencil stopped. She whispered Grace. "Grace Dawson." Eli's heart hung. His mug shook before he set it down. "She was my sister," he answered softly. "My name's Eli Turner." "I'm," after pausing, he added. "Your uncle." Looking up, Lily no widening of her eyes. A long, steady glance, no gasp or shock. Nodding, she seemed to know. "She talked about you," she whispered. "Her snapshot was of you and her. She carried it in her coat. They promised to find you when it was safe." Eli's jaw stiffened and hands formed fists. He had spent the last decade convincing himself he couldn't change anything, and that Grace's departure was her choice and consequence. Faced with her abandoned child, all her reasons seemed hollow. "Why didn't she?" he whispered. Lily checked her notebook. "She got sick," she said. "Coughed often." She stopped moving. Then she left. The wood creaked as Eli fell into the chair opposite her. Max lifted his head to gently rest it on Lily's foot. The gesture made her flinch, then relax. He inquired, "Where were you living then?" "With Tracy and Martin," she said. When those names were mentioned, Max's ears twitched and his chest growled. "Not missed by Eli." "Tracy," he repeated. "Your stepmother?" Lily nods. "She disliked me. He called me Grace's mess." Eli observed her hands tightening around the pencil as her voice trembled. "I destroyed things because I was quiet and odd," she added. Not once did she weep. Max stood up, circled the table, and hugged her legs. She leaned into him to stay together. "She informed everyone I stole Sophie's new game." At her birthday, Lily continued. "They had cake while she made me clean. She claimed I couldn't sleep indoors." Twitching fingers, Eli. He gently approached the ancient secretary desk near the bookshelves. No one had touched it in years. Grace would sit there composing rarely sent letters. He searched through envelopes, receipts, scrawled poetry, and sketches in the top drawer until he found one sealed in a yellowed envelope with his name in fading black ink. "Eli." He retreated to the table and cautiously opened it. The aged paper inside was velvety. Grace wrote with lengthy, hesitant strokes. If Eli is reading this, I probably couldn't tell you in person. Never intended for us to end this way. You once supported me. Sorry for disappointing you. Lily isn't a mistake. My one nice deed was her. Please don't lose her if anything happens to me and you find her by God's grace. She deserves more than I gave. Love. Grace. Eli read the letter again and pressed it flat on the table. Silently, Lily observed him. He stated it's your mom's handwriting. Lily nods. Finger tracing letters was my habit. Saying, words have weight. Eli saw Max sitting erect alongside Lily, tense and listening to the door. Muttered, you knew, didn't you? You picked her out of that storm like you were looking for someone, like you could smell her blood. Max barked deeply and sharply, then stopped. Eli stood and took a photo album from the bookcase. Birthday parties, lake summers, and Grace in her denim jacket with her hands on her hips like she ran the world were in the photos. One photo in the rear caught his attention. Grace holding newborn. A thin hospital bracelet hung on her wrist. She never told us, Eli whispered. Not my parents, not me. She departed. They didn't want me, Lily remarked. Not bitter, just real. Eli turned to her. That's false. Her head tilted. Why was I a burden? Eli didn't reply. After Lily went to bed and Max returned to his post outside her door, Eli sat by the fireplace with Grace's letter and the photo. Face cut in gloom, he peered into the flames. The antique clock chimed twice in the corner. Outside, snow fell again. Gentle, gradual, this time. Eli softly whispered to himself as he watched Max in the corridor. We won't lose her either. A slow drift of snow-covered Fairbanks hills and rooftops like ashes from a fading fire. The life-filled cabin stood out like a warm breath in a freezing environment. Eli paced near the front window, arms crossed, jaw clenched. Tire traces in the snow stopped before his porch. A silver, antiseptic government SUV hummed silently, steam billowing from its hood. Lily sat on the couch with her legs tucked, drinking warm milk, inside the house. Max rested alongside her, head across her lap, and his tail thudded sometimes, reassuring her. Two figures came from the SUV 10 minutes earlier. Eli watched them through the window as they organized papers near the car and whispered words. Steps crushed up the front steps. A measured, professional knock. Eli opened the door. The first was a 40-something woman in a forest green wool coat and dark pants. Regional Child Protective Services Senior Social Worker Danielle Ramos. Tall and poised with mocha skin, short hair, and gold-rimmed glasses, she exuded quiet power. She spoke clearly but politely. Mr. Turner, hi, Danielle Ramos. Thanks for calling. Behind her was a pale, stocky, slightly bald man with a neat gray mustache and a clipboard. Sheriff's CPS Liaison Officer Ray Milner. His suit was neat, his boots were spotless, and his eyes were worn from seeing too many failed houses. Nodded but didn't smile. Eli retreated. Come in. Shaking snow from their shoulders, they entered. Danielle quickly examined the fireplace, furniture, Lily, and Max. After a moment, she nodded in satisfaction of the dog's calmness. Max remained still as Lily shrank and stiffened her shoulder. His piercing, unblinking gaze watched every move. Danielle added, I understand this is Lily Dawson, kneeling to avoid dominating the youngster. Dear, is that right? Lily nodded once. She remained silent. She grabbed her notebook. Our stay is brief. Danielle promised. We just want to understand. Mr. Turner, I read your report. It's worrying. Grace's letter, Lily's drawings, and a photo of Grace cradling an infant Lily outside a Billings clinic were in Eli's manila folder. Danielle skimmed it professionally. Do you know her guardian's location? Officer Milner inquired. Town dwellers. Tracy, Martin Miller. Milner noted. Standing, Danielle smoothed her coat. We must communicate with them. An hour later, the living room altered. Lily hid in the hall behind the archway. Max stayed with her like a guard. Tracy Miller stood across from Eli with her arms crossed and lips pursed in concern. In her late 30s, she wore a cream turtleneck and fitted coat with her blonde hair in a ponytail. Under makeup, her face looked smooth and controlled, but the eyes were steely, sharpened by years of hiding resentment. Martin Miller was a plain 40-year-old with a receding hairline and deep mouth lines beside her. He looked like he had mastered evasion in a navy windcheater and scuffed boots. Tracy started. She insisted Lily fled. This is all misunderstanding. Stressed, she withdraws. We've tried everything. She doesn't respond to counseling or extra attention. Now this. Martin nodded slowly, but said nothing. He kept his hands in his coat pockets. This woman stole from our daughter. A pricey electronic game. Tracy continued. We found it under her mattress. She vanished overnight. We were sick with worry. Max roared. It was low yet obvious. Room went quiet. Tracy's face chilled. Danielle faced the hallway. She lovingly called Lily. Want to say anything? A pause. Still holding her journal, Lily left. She cautiously approached Max and kneeled beside him, one hand on his neck. She responded gently, I didn't take it. Sophie placed it. Mom told her. Tracy breathed to interject, but Danielle raised a hand. Lily's voice shook. Sleeping in the laundry room was required. I couldn't eat with them. Spilt food meant skipping meals. Because I was dirty, I missed Ava's party. Officer Milner was frantically jotting notes when Danielle looked up. Lily said, I slept on a mat next to the freezer, staring down. Sometimes they forgot I was there. Eli handed Danielle one last document. A written statement from retired teacher Clara Hewitt, who resided 2 houses down from the Millers. Clara, a 70-year-old silver-haired widow, called earlier that week after seeing Lily's face on a bulletin. She wrote briefly yet harshly. I saw that girl without a coat several times in the snow. Tracy told me to mind my own business when I offered her hot chocolate. She was afraid. Letter folded. Danielle put it in her folder. Do you have anything else to say, Mrs. Miller? Said. Tracy's voice broke. We tried our best. Not our daughter. We didn't expect this hardship. One bark from Max Sharp. Loud, final. Lily flinched, then smiled. Not at the bark, but at its sound, like a snow line. Danielle sighed and closed her folder. I'll want emergency protective custody, she said. Lily will stay with Mr. Turner while we investigate starting immediately. We may go to family court. Tracy's mouth opened and closed. Martin examined his feet. No one intervened. Danielle kneeled alongside Lily again as they left. Are you okay staying here? She asked. Lily nods. Max arrived. Danielle grinned. That sound reasoning. Snow clung to the courtroom stairs like winter bones. Fairbend had an obstinate gray sky, retaining frigid even as the sun broke through. The aging radiator hissed silently in the narrow municipal building, losing to the draft through the windows. The courtroom was small, with oak benches worn smooth by decades of small-town disputes, a slightly crooked judge's bench, and fluorescent lights that hummed overhead. Eli sat erect in his sister's burial navy blazer, newly pressed. His shoulders filled the frame, his jaw newly shaved, but his hard lines and tight eyes showed how little sleep he'd had. He only moved his right shoulder when necessary because it was still stiff from shrapnel repair. Max rested on the floor next him, his thick fur smoothed out and collar shining. Idle but vigilant, the German shepherd's amber eyes watched the door like a soldier waiting instructions. Lily sat next to Eli on the polished bench, her legs swinging, wearing Sarah's patched navy coat and corduroy trousers from the night before. A modest braid held her hair back, and her pale face still showed the faint bruise of previous anxiety. Her lap held the little spiral notepad with fingers wrapped around its edge. When she entered the courtroom and Max followed without hesitation, she muttered, He's better than a lawyer anyway. The morning had been quiet. The hearing was presided over by Elaine Hart. Judge Hart, in her early 50s, had the elegance of a woman who had never raised her voice in a male-dominated courtroom. Her shoulder-length auburn hair was practical and neat. She was firm but not icy, and her pale blue eyes surveyed the room without missing anything. The usual black robe was replaced by a deep burgundy one, a quiet protest against convention no one dared dispute. Court is now in session for the matter of temporary custody regarding minor Lily Dawson, she said calmly.